So she said yes, but he clearly didn't hear that. So I tried to construct a case of consent without uptake. I don't know if I succeeded. Anyway, we see this scene. We think, well, this guy was a bit of a jerk. And so we form like a judgment that consent needs uptake or whatever. Did this example work for the kind of thing you were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So now we learned that in fact this didn't really happen. These were just actors playing out the scene. So there was no wrong action taking place here at all, right? What I would say is that actually the moral lesson we learned still holds good, even if these people are just actors playing out the scene, right? So we were still kind of shown this action kind and concluded it was wrong, and we learned something from that. And so so when you think that Jones and Smith and their behavior plays an important epistemological role in learning about morality, actually they don't. Like this particular event actually isn't a premise of your moral learning, but the kind that you think it instantiates is the thing that you draw moral conclusions from, actually. And also, like, just read a philosophy paper. You're giving a case, right? Or you're given many cases, but they're actually not particulars in the sense of non-repeatable events. They're just very detailed, described kinds. And so it's important here not to see that the word kind can be these really complicated things, right? So for example, a guy in a bar asks, "Can I buy a drink?" Doesn't really care about the answer and does it anyway. That's a kind. Even though we might like think about this kind for the first time by witnessing a particular guy do all this, the particular event actually isn't important to normative epistemology. It's the kind. If that makes, does any of that make sense?
It does, and it's a strong response, but I have a few concerns. One is, in the case of the actors, I mean, we have actual persons. Our belief refer to particular individuals, so it's not clear that what we're perceiving really is some sort of universal factor, so much it's a relation between people, and then we sort of think about, okay, what can we infer from a misunderstanding about this particular A and the particular B, given that it's referring to people in a particular manner. I think that the belief, I'm not sure the belief it concerns a universal, unless sort of every belief concerns a universal in some sense, because every belief refers to some relation or property. But second, I'm worried that if that's true, even if your account is right, that everything here, or everything in the moral world concerns some sort of universal. The universals are very particular, right? So are all moral rights, except for in cases of rectification, limited to property and body? Well, all right. I mean, maybe sort of no matter what case we imagine, it's going to be repeatable in the sense we could substitute different people in for the positions. But I'm worried that the epistemology doesn't really link up to your approach, in the sense that in the paper, which by the way is really well written, you seem to say that, look, our intuitions really are operating at the level of these fundamental kinds, and I just don't think that's true. I mean, I think they operate on these difficult questions like property rights or uptake at a very specific level, even those are kinds. And again, I'm not sure about that. And if it operates at a very particular level, then I'm just not sure that the epistemology part of your paper is as convincing, because of the specificity of the intuitions that you're using to support your the features about kinds.
Okay. And so this thing about third order deontic norms, I should probably know what that is, but I don't.
So take the notion it's wrong to lie, and then we have the notion of an overrider, right? Lying would be okay if you're preventing murder, and then you have some Kantian notion there are no overriders because of dignity. So the dignity is a third order claim, applies to second order claim, second claim, third.
Okay.
And I'm just not sure our intuitions have that level of sophistication with regard to kinds. They might with regard to, Al and Bob, again, suggesting that we're referring to either individuals or very, very specific universals.
Fine.
So my intuition
I
is
see.
not that sophisticated.
Now I understand. Yeah, but I don't think. I think I can just go along with that and say that sure, there are kinds where we don't have direct intuitions, but we have intuitions about less or second order norms in your way of cutting it up, and then the third order ones we just justify by inference to the best explanation or something. That so we don't have direct intuitions about there not being any defeaters of the second order thing or something. But that's we justify that from it from its coherence with the best answers to the things at lower levels, if that makes sense. Yeah. So so I'm not committed to us having intuitions about kinds at every level, right? So just like everyone else, I can say that this really fancy Kantian business is justified either from it fitting in the best explanation of the below stuff or is not justified.
Okay, perfect. So Tom, if you want to ask your question, you can.
Cool. Hey, how's it going? In my view of morality, the best of all possible worlds, if we maximized morality, would look like a world where it's impossible to force any agent to do anything they don't consent to doing. What would, if we maximized your view of morality, what would the best moral world look like?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, like I said to Dr. Steinhardt, that my view is just neutral. It can take any first order normative view whatsoever. Well, there's a crazy kind of particularism that denies supervenience. Obviously, I can't take that on board. But apart from that, I'm like, it's compatible with any substantive normative view.
Would that include counterintuitive ones like Nazi morality?
Sure. Yeah. So and yeah, and this is okay. Good. So maybe there are views that don't have this implication, right? So the Nazi, in my account, isn't breaking the rules of English. Like a Nazi is not like violating the semantic norms of these words. So there are some views where who would maybe go the other way on that question. But I think if you let's even go further than the Nazi, right? Let's go take someone who really hates pleasure or something. And so they're offered a wonderful day at the beach, and they say, no, don't do that to me. They wouldn't make sense to you at first, right? But if you kind of asked follow-up questions and you discovered that actually this judgment is part of a coherent whole, then you would understand what they're saying. Then you would, okay, I'm able to understand the words coming out of your mouth. But I claim if someone violates supervenience, that's not the case, right? So if someone says this car is fantastic, that car is terrible, but they're identical in every way, then I just don't understand what they're saying. So yeah, so the only place where this view makes a kind of a cut like that is at supervenience. If you violate supervenience, then according to me, you're breaking the rules of English. But every substantive normative view is possible to express in English without speaking bad English, according to this view.
Thanks.
All right, cool beans. It looks like Eric had a question. Eric Wallace. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I've got a question. It seems to me that you're committed to some kind of, well, correct me if I'm wrong here. It seems to me like you're committed to some kind of factualism about ethics here, and you might not think this is a problem. So here I'm understanding factualism to be something like this. If you understand all of the facts of the matter, you can adjudicate one way or the other on the moral judgment. So something like this, if I say I slapped my friend, and you know all of the facts of the matter, all of the relevant properties, and you know everything there is to know about the kinds that this particular action might be an example of, you could tell me with certainty whether this action is good or bad. And this may seem intuitive, but I'm worried that although it may on the face of it seem intuitive, we've got good reason to reject this view in favor of a kind of non-factualism, where non-factualism is the view that there are, but potentially they're facts, but facts of a different kind, or non-factual things that will determine what way we should answer the question. So Hartree-Field gives the example of reliability. He's talking about epistemology here and whether a certain method of forming beliefs is reliable. And he thinks without knowing about our epistemic goals, our epistemic norms, or not norms, sorry, epistemic aims or epistemic goals, I can't give you a proper answer to the question whether it's reliable. Another example might be, I can measure temperature in degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit, and there's no fact of the matter that determines which one I ought to use. We've got to know a bit about what my purposes are. Say I'm talking to someone who only knows how to work Fahrenheit, then I ought to use Fahrenheit. And the worry here is going to be, say we've got some act of courage, and I'm trying to work out whether it's brave or it's foolhardy or potentially both. The worry here is we're going to have some non-factual aspect in here. For example, about my purposes in talking about your courageous action, what I'm trying to communicate, things like that. And so there are going to be non-factual concerns here that determine whether it is correct for me to say that your action was brave or it was foolhardy. Similar to how when I'm trying to adjudicate on whether your method of belief formation is reliable or not, I've got to know a bit about your epistemic aims. And the worry is there isn't room for that kind of consideration in this view.
Right. So I'm struggling a bit to see why I'm committed to factualism in your terms. I mean, so suppose an angel whispers in my ear that this slap had all of these properties and those are all the relevant ones, right? So then I'll know which kind was the morally relevant kind that it exemplified. But I still might not know whether that kind is right or wrong or neutral, or I mean, there's a second component there, right? And yeah, Do you see why I'm resisting that implication?
Yeah, so the thought is something like this. You perform some kind of action, and whether or not it's right to say that it's brave or foolhardy is not just going to depend on your action, but it's going to depend a bit on my purposes in evaluating it. And the worry would be that moral language is like this.
Good.
And
Okay, I see.
you're
Good.
saying, if I know everything about the action, I don't have to know the context in which it's evaluated or the purposes for which it's evaluated. It's just the stuff about the action that's relevant.
Good. I got you. Yeah. So this is essentially like assessor relativism.
Yeah, I mean, once we're agreed on what our purposes are, for example, in the epistemic case, we agree about what our epistemic aims are, then the facts are going to tell us with certainty whether the thing was reliable or not, and similar in this case. Yeah.
No, okay, good, excellent. So I think I would say yes and no. So on this view, as I spell it out, the basic normative propositions are just one property applied or one predicate applied to another one, right? So this action kind is wrong or whatever. So as I spell it out, there's just one argument placed there, right? Hence, there's no room for assessor relativism. But if you wanted, you could easily develop the view and put in a second argument place there, right, for the assessor. So wrong, action kind, and assessor, or assessment situation, or whatever, right? You could just add another argument place. And then, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that would give you supervenience so long as you hold the kind of assessor situation fixed. But the same action could be wrong given like one assessment context, but then right if you put in a different assessment context. You're following me, right? So it's just a matter of like these general claims that in the very end of the definition, the way I have them, they just have one argument place. But you could add an argument place and get the kind of view that that you're attracted to. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Dr. Steinhardt, I think, had his hand raised. So yeah, go ahead. You're muted. You're muted.
Yep. My internet maybe is a little glitchy. But yeah, I'm wondering then, from some of the other things you've said now, is this kind of view, your view sounds to me like a kind of structuralism. Like there are these sort of kinds that are morally significant and they stand in these relations to each other. There are these various relations about them, and there are all these properties which are very detailed. But it's the supervenience thing leads us to think that what's really at heart is structure. And I'm not attributing this to you. I'm just wondering. I mean, it seems very interesting. Like that seems like a novel and very interesting. You found structuralism in philosophy of math as well as other places, and a perfectly lovely kind of Platonism, for what it's worth. And before you answer, I just wanted to mention, because I forgot before, I don't know if you know the work of Justin Clark Doane, who's written about math morality. So sure, I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, structuralism, is it good, bad, indifferent? Is it? And then it struck me that your thing from the structuralist thing, I don't know, do you know Steve Hale's paper, Consistent Relativism, where he very, very beautiful. It was in Mind probably 15 years ago. Very beautifully, just says, look, all the stuff that philosophers say about relativism is wrong. You can just use kind of a second order modal logic to just spell out a completely consistent version of relativism that makes enormous sense. And that also has ties to some of the structuralist kinds of things, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, in math, you're probably familiar. Well, it doesn't matter if I use the von Neumann ordinals or the Zermelo ordinals. What matters is the structure. These structures are relative to each other, and it's perfectly consistent. There's no contradiction if I use one on Tuesday and another one on Wednesday. So those are just some of the more metaphysically, mathy kinds of things that I'm just curious about.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think I'm gonna have anything intelligent to say about that. I don't know philosophy of math as well as I should. I'll definitely check out the Hale paper.
It's Hales, Hales,
Hale.
Stephen Hales. And it's just called a consistent relativism.